Hello, and welcome tonight to What the Internet Knows About You. So, I am Kara. I am the Adult Services and Outreach Librarian at the Oregon Public Library, and I am a librarian, not a security expert. So you know, I'm not in IT. I don't know everything, but what I do know is some things and how to find stuff. Um, so I've done research on this topic, and I will provide citations throughout for where I found that information. And the slides are available. I can email them out to you if you are interested. So my email is here if you would like the slides. So yes, that's my little disclaimer. But let's get started. So here's what I will cover today. These are like the different sections that I wanted to cover, but it's important to know, like, why are we here? So when we're online, we produce data. When we get notifications that produces things, websites collect information when they use cookies, which I'll talk more about. When we use social media to connect with families, we don't always know how that information is used, and that's creepy. Also, it's tough because everything is always changing really fast, and it can be hard to know how to be safe. So, you can always be safer though. So, just learning a little bit can really be helpful to be a little bit more safe. So here's our agenda. What we'll be covering tonight: what is privacy, how data mining is creepy, myths about hacking, what can we do, easy things we can do, and then I'll finish up with a little bit about passwords. So what is privacy? So if you have an interest in history, you know that privacy is a fairly new concept. Going back to ancient Rome, with the communal baths, and even in more recent history, when families slept in one room, the idea of having space to yourself wasn't really a thing. Privacy really became a concern historically with the invention of the camera. People didn't want to have their photos taken and felt like they should have a right to be left alone. So then, in 1967, with the rise of the mainframe computer, the definition of privacy changes slightly. So, I mean, there have been tons of academic papers written on the idea of privacy, and also like books written about it too. So this is just a really short snippet. But in the 60s, the meaning of privacy changed, which is important to the presentation. And it's not that you're no longer able to opt out. The new idea of privacy was about control, to have the right to control the information about yourself and the right to decide how information is communicated to others. So you'll notice one of these definitions talk about secrecy. And privacy really isn't about keeping secrets away from people. So it's about autonomy, identity, and intimacy, deciding who, how, and what is shared about you. And often the rebuttal is, well, I have nothing to hide. And honestly, I've said this in the past as well. Well, I have nothing to hide. Go ahead, look through my stuff. But again, it's about autonomy and making those decisions. So even if I have nothing to hide, I still have a right to be able to decide who can see what I'm not hiding. So here on the next slide, I will read this quote. Arguing that you don't care about privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say. And this is a quote from Edward Snowden. the famed whistleblower, uh, and say what you want about him, but he does make a good point here. It's great you have nothing to hide, but other people may feel differently for many reasons, and they deserve to be able to make decisions about their privacy that feels good for them. There are many legal reasons why you may want privacy. If you're a social activist, people in abusive relationships, people with medical issues, people with LGBTQIA identities, and just personal preference, whatever you prefer and feels comfortable. And these are all valid reasons for wanting privacy. So the points from this slide come from teachprivacy.com. So there are a lot of instances when a person might want privacy. There may be health concerns that they may be discriminated against if it becomes known, or maybe they're just not ready to share that information with the world yet. Sometimes you need to wrap your head around something before everybody knows your business. People may be involved in social or political activities that are not illegal, but they might be persecuted for it. We saw this with activists who were doxxed after attending protests in 2020, 2021, and 2022, and yeah, until recently. So doxing, or being doxed, is the act of publicly revealing private personal information about an individual or an organization. It's usually a home address or a phone number or something like that. So let's say you attended a legal nonviolent protest and a photo of you at that protest was shared online. People then matched your photo from the protest to your social media accounts, and then were able to find your physical address. So now you're being harassed in person and also on all of your social media accounts. And yeah, that's not cool. So someone may be trying to escape an abusive relationship and not wanting to be found. And there's just lots of reasons why someone might not feel comfortable with information about them being shared, and people deserve to have their privacy. The bottom line is you shouldn't have to explain why you want privacy. It's just a thing we deserve. So again, for more in-depth information about why privacy matters, you can go to teachprivacy.com. All right, data mining can be creepy. So now we've established that what privacy is. Let's talk a little bit about how it can be violated while you're online in ways you didn't know about. So data mining, or data mining, is when large data sets are examined to find patterns, and those patterns generate new information about something. So essentially, it's taking details that people give freely and finding patterns in them. And the patterns are what make the data meaningful and valuable. So it doesn't sound too bad when you just look at the straight definition of it. But let's look at some methods of collecting data online and let's pick back up with this in a moment. Okay, so website tracking. You may not even know when you're being tracked, but here's an example I have. You're on a website and you agree to have a cookie downloaded to your browser. You don't always even agree to it. Sometimes it just happens without you even knowing. So what a cookie is, not that cookie. A cookie is something that's saved to your browser for the purposes of remembering information about your preferences. It could save the font size or another website preference like that. It can also save recent searches. So when you start to type in the search box, your search will pop up automatically. And you can opt into it. You can opt into this with remember me on this computer. But sometimes it just remembers you without even you asking it to. Okay, so that's a cookie. We also have tracking cookies. So I'm sure this has happened to you before. I know it's happened to me. My husband has used my computer to read about one of his hobbies, which is playing guitar. But then when I log into a social media channel, all of the ads are about guitars. So that's because of tracking cookies. They saw an interest and matched it to advertisements. It feels kind of creepy, but it's like not the worst thing in the world. It may actually help you find a new product or guitar that you didn't know existed. But ultimately, it's done for a company to make money. In this case, Facebook makes money off of selling ads, and companies who advertise on Facebook make money when you purchase their products. Tracking cookies can also be exploited or misused to track other online behavior. So it would seem, so if you went from this website to that website and you scrolled through a certain amount of things and then moved on, it can track that behavior with the cookie. And then your behavior can be analyzed and data mined. So if after you went to this website, you went to that website, they can use that information to monetize something and make money off of it. Most of the time, tracking cookies are anonymous, meaning that they don't know you, specifically you, are doing these things, but they have a profile of a person in your general area that's doing these things. So they don't know it's me, Kara, in Oregon, Wisconsin, but they know that someone in Oregon is searching for guitars or something like that. The information found on tracking cookies can be collected and sold to companies or analyzed and data mined. They can also sell your data to other companies that then use it to make money. So it could be the raw data, the analyzed data, or anything like that. So information about things you do is making someone else money. We're starting to see this is a little creepy. All right. So you can clear your cookies, and you should do this periodically, but it's really only a temporary fix. So you do this by opening your browser of choice and holding Control-Shift-Delete down, and this brings up a dialog box where you can select to delete your cookies in cache. So again, it's only a temporary fix, but you can do it. So let's take a look at an example that may hit a little bit close to home. Stores have almost always tracked your purchases. Even without technology, if you made a big purchase and the owner remembered it, they'd ask how it was going, or if you needed more, or anything like that. And that's really just basic sales. But with technology, companies have been able to get even more data. And just like business owners before technology, they're using them to collect data that's available to them. So one example is a loyalty card. When you swipe your Hy-Vee card or some other loyalty card, the company can see what you're buying and how often you're buying it. They found this to be profitable, knowing when or how you purchase something. They can generate coupons or know when to put things on sale based on your data. So, okay, they got to make money, fine. But now with even more information, companies have even more available to them, and they put together target profiles to make more accurate targeted ads. So back in 2012, we have an example of how a company was data mining. So Target used data mining to predict when customers were pregnant and then advertised baby products to those people. A parent of a 16-year-old complained when she got a packet of coupons in the mail that were all related to pregnancy products. It turns out that Target predicted that the 16-year-old was pregnant based on her previous purchases. And there was a massive outcry in the public about privacy as a result of this incident. And for many, this was the first time they'd heard about data mining or had any concerns about privacy. And below here, I linked to the Forbes article about this issue, specifically this Target issue. So online privacy becomes even more complicated considering that we carry around a computer in our pocket. I am, of course, referring to cell phones. As you've probably seen on TV crime shows, mobile service providers can track your phone based on your GPS and satellite signals. What you may not realize is that you can also be tracked based on what apps or Wi-Fi signal you're using. With Wi-Fi, if it's an unsecured network, which is one that is available without a password, people can hack into and monitor people's activity on the network. But with apps, it's really built in. So while with Wi-Fi, it requires a hacker, with apps, like the hacking, you agree to. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So many apps use a third-party code, which could be used for displaying a map or showing ads or something like that. So the app tracks, let's say the app tracks your running route and uses your location to track your route. So you have to have your location on when you're running. This, is good for the app because you can then see how far you ran that day or test out different routes to see which ones you like best and that sort of thing. But now that app has your location all the time, or at least it potentially has that location all the time. It could get information on when you go to the grocery store, the doctor's office, a women's shelter, or anything else. And unless you read the agreement, and sometimes even after you read the agreement and don't know what it means, you really don't know how this information is being used. Something you give access to sometimes, sorry, you give access to your location, your photos, your contacts, your browser history, or something else. You may not even know what you've given permission to. So that's pretty creepy. I'll say I think that's creepy. And there's other reasons why we should care. I don't know who said this, but I've heard it a lot as I've done research on this topic. If you aren't paying for a product, you are the product. So companies exist to make money. We've all had to accept that. They provide services in exchange for money. That's pretty simple. But when their service is free, they have to make money somehow. And it's usually by using the data or information that you are giving them. I like free things, but I always try to balance that with understanding that my online behavior could be making somebody else a lot of money. So let's go into some reasons why our online data is important and the unintended consequences of not knowing about how our online data and online personas could be used. So a consequence of all this online data is sometimes information is available that we don't want to be available. And so the example I have here is from 2018, and a fitness app called Strava released popular running routes. So the idea was you could meet up with other people who run similar routes, or you could find a new route suggested to you based on where you have been running. And on the surface, that's a pretty cool idea. It's cool to be able to find community with people who enjoy things that you like too. But it turned out that US military personnel were also using Strava to track their running routes. And they were also doing this on a secret base in the middle of the desert. So when Strava released this update, the location of the military base was essentially released. So it was like in the middle of the desert, there's nothing there, and then there's all these people running around. So like, why? It's a military base. So that was a huge oops. And I have a link to a BBC article about this incident back in 2018. So also depending on what information people can get about you, you can have your identity stolen. And I think by now, probably most people have had at least a scare of identity theft, if not lost money or actually had their identity stolen. So in 2016, the head technologist on the Federal Trade Commission was hacked. What happened was someone got her phone number and used an enrichment service to get more information about her. So an enrichment service is a company that you pay to find more information about somebody. It can be like a background check organization or, something like that. So this individual now had this information about the head technologist of the Federal Trade Commission. And with this information, someone bought 2 phones on her cell phone plan. So she got notified of these new phones on her account, and had to deal with that. So if the lead technologist of the FTC can have her identity stolen, it really can happen to anybody. Another thing that's an unintended consequence of some of this data mining is discrimination. And it's not something you would immediately think of, but when ads are targeted to key demographics, it means that not everybody will see it. And so it's one thing if you're targeting ads for hair care products or shoes or something like that. But if you're advertising for a job or housing or a credit card, it's a problem because you're purposefully excluding somebody based on their data, based on their actual physical identity. So we have an example of this here in 2019. Facebook had a big issue. So federal law prohibits discrimination in ads on housing, jobs, and credit based on race, gender, and age. In 2019, Facebook announced that it would stop allowing targeted ads for housing, jobs, or credit based on race, gender, or age. And this is the direct result of a settlement with groups that sued Facebook over these practices, because it's discriminatory. And I linked to a New York Times article about this. Also in 2019, Pew Research had a report. And their report found that the public overwhelmingly feels like they don't have control over the information that's collected about them by the government or by companies. And so with this idea of privacy that we talked about in the beginning, is what's so important about privacy is we need to be able to control the information. And really overwhelmingly, the public doesn't feel like they have control over it. So we generally don't feel like we have privacy. Okay, so now we're going to go over some myths about hacking. And the first myth is only foolish people are hacked. And as we saw with the FTC lead technologist, that's simply not true. Sure, foolish people are hacked, but also cautious people who take precautions are hacked. And it's not a matter of whether you will get hacked, it's more a matter of when. And part of this is because we participate in a network, for example, the internet. Or social media, and we depend on others to protect us and our interests. It's important to know that someone doesn't have to intend to harm us to make us less safe online. It could be an accident. And when I say a lot of people are hacked, I've also been hacked. It happens. It's part of that network. I got an email. I thought it was fine because it was from a colleague, and my colleague had been hacked. So then I was hacked. So it does happen. All right. The next myth is that I'm not a target. And it's simply untrue. We are all targets because our usernames and passwords are valuable. Your financial and medical records are valuable. Your online behavior trail is valuable because it can be sold and traded and shared. And your money is money. So even if it's not a lot, it's money. So we are all targets. So it's hard to think about that, but just kind of let it wash over you. Okay, so the next myth is that you have antivirus software and that's enough to protect you. So you might be safer because of antivirus software, but that does not mean you are safe. The threats that we face are not necessarily to your devices, but to our data. So you click a link, you open an email, or you let someone connect to your network, and you can be hacked even if you don't get a virus on your machine. So it's good to have antivirus software. I am not in any way telling you to delete it, but it's just not enough to fully protect you. So when I'm online, I'm anonymous. So that means I'm safe, right? I mean, like, maybe, but you're probably not as anonymous as you think. While your name and social security number may not be attached to your online presence, we give out so much information, so much more than we think. And sometimes we do this willingly through social media. Also, your online activity can often give clues to your identity, and your IP address, which is assigned to you by your internet service provider, is often linked to a general location. So again, even though it's not like, hey, it's you, Kara Ripley, it's somebody in this area. And so you're really not as anonymous as you think. Another myth is that email is safe. It's just not true. Email can be hacked. So never send a attachment that has your social security number in email. Avoid emailing your driver's license number, any important documents. Do not save your passwords on email. Email is just not a secure platform. And the next one, the last one, is social media is safe. And it's just not. It's not about if your boss saw that picture of your vacation, but it's really about what the social media platform knows about you and who they are selling it to. And then what are the people they're selling it to using it for? So just the simple act of participating in social media can make you a target. So that brings us to this next topic, which is, what can we do? It's now that you know it's almost impossible to not leave a data trail online or using mobile devices, what are you going to do about it? So the best solution would be to stop creating data. I can't even say this with a straight face. So to do this, you'd have to close all your accounts. You'd never see pictures of your friends or family online again, and you have to get off of the grid. So I can't. Okay, that is one response to the threat. But that's not really what we're going to do. It's not a realistic solution. And then also, I don't know, if everybody moved out to the middle of nowhere, then everybody would be living in the middle of nowhere. And where's that now? So there's a lot of ways to be safer online. So, One way is to think about how to manage your risk and build a threat model. So when you build a threat model, you're looking at what you do online and what's important that you continue doing. You look at the devices you have and what worries you a lot and what is likely. So, I mean, I might be really worried about being attacked by birds because I just saw the birds. Um, and so I'm freaked out about it. Okay. But then I do a little bit more research and I find out that being attacked by birds is very rare, but I'm still very worried about it. I might change my behaviors, like reducing the amount of time I spend eating bread and birdseed outside. I might research bird attacks. I may find that they're very rare and I may change my behaviors a little bit, but I still might be worried. So it's all about that research that you do and then your personal preference. Maybe that research helps you understand that it is rare. And so, I'll eat a sandwich outside now. It's really up to you. So to help you research what is likely and what are potential threats, there are resources that you can use. So securityplanner.org, this is a resource you can learn to use more, learn more about what's out there. So this resource is free, but it is sponsored by Consumer Reports. So it provides personalized recommendations and expert advice. There are no third-party ads, and it takes you through important things to think about. It provides recommendations, but there are also options for free and paid for recommendations. So you can throw some money at it and feel a little more protected, or you can also just use the free version and just kind of think about Consumer Reports and if you feel comfortable with that. So here is the Security Planner homepage. You answer a few questions, and then the website connects you with suggestions for things you can do to be safer. So here are some resources that have been selected for me to go through to make the best decisions about what's out there and how I can protect myself. So they suggested multi-factor authentication, which is when I sign into my email, it sends me a text that I have to verify, and things like that. And lots of other suggestions. There were 24 tips when I went through that. The next resource is SSD, the Surveillance Self-Defense resource here. So it's an online guide to help protect yourself from electronic surveillance. It was put together by the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that works to defend civil liberties in the digital world. So the reason why I included this information about the organization is you should know where you're getting your advice from, especially if it's free, because if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. As I was going through their website, it said, please use SD as a starting point for your own research and check for more recent facts, cases, and authorities. Aside from not using the Oxford comma in there, it was a really great example of what you want a website to say. You should be wary of websites that say they have all the answers or to just do what they say. So this was a great example of encouraging you to read widely and make decisions for yourself. I was also encouraged by, the funding statement that they had put together. So you can know how the website is being paid for. So this is the SSD homepage. They have links to further learning and security scenarios and other guides and basics. This page really has a lot of information on it, but it is really well done and written in easy to understand language. The next resource is techsafety.org. This is a project of SafetyNet at the National Network to End Domestic Violence. They have digital services toolkit that gives good advice for protecting yourself online. You might think that domestic violence and internet safety are unrelated, But people who experience domestic violence need to be able to privately share information and may be seeking information that is not kept private. It may make them feel unsafe from their partner. So they really are connected. And so this is just a really great resource when you're looking for reliable information about privacy. So here's a screenshot of that webpage, and they have great links to articles and lots of information. So now let's talk about easy things you can do to be safer online. First, look at your devices. One easy way to reduce the risk is to getting rid of devices you don't use. This is like buying fewer lottery tickets. It reduces your chances. So if you don't use it, get rid of it. If you do use a device, make sure that it is running the most recent update. Software companies still release updates when they're able to fix bugs or vulnerabilities. Always keep your computer running on the newest version of its operating system, or any programs that it uses. There are a handful of times when a program is discontinued or will not receive any more updates. So if you're using one of those programs that was discontinued, try to replace them with a newer version that will be updated. Or just think really hard about if you still need to use that software that's no longer being supported. This one's really easy, especially with a smartphone. Turn off or limit Bluetooth, locations, and Wi-Fi. A quick way to do this is to turn your phone on airplane mode, and try to do this whenever you're out and about. Of course, that's when it's most convenient to use your phone. But if you use any apps that have third-party information like location, this will turn that off so that that information won't be gathered. I now notice this all the time when I install an app on my phone. I notice it asks my permission to access my photos, contacts, location, especially when it gives no reason to. So this really now gives me pause. Do I really want to finish installing this app? I'm playing a connecting the dot game and it wants to access my contacts. Why? Does it really need to do that so I can hit 3 jewels? I don't know. So if I do decide to finish installing the app, I usually will block permission to these settings and see if it breaks the app. And sometimes it does. So sometimes the app really does need access to the location for it to work, but it often does not. And if revoking access to a certain permission breaks the app, I can always add the permission back in. The reason for limiting this access is often because free apps make money by selling data that they access. So limit access to these services from third-party apps since you don't know what's happening with it. Smart things have issues. So if you can, avoid smart things. Now, this isn't to say you should never use Alexa or anything like that. It goes back to your threat assessment, what you're comfortable with. If you do use Alexa or other smart tools, really read that privacy information and explore all of the settings. So back in 2019, there was an article about how Amazon listens to what you tell Alexa. And this is in part true and still true. So I have a screenshot here of the Alexa device FAQs from the Amazon website. I took this screenshot on October 10th of this year, so just a couple weeks ago. And it says, the highlighted portion, supervised machine learning, an industry standard practice where humans review an extremely small sample of requests to help Alexa understand the correct interpretation of a request and provide the appropriate response in the future. So what this statement means is people listen, real people, listen to a small sample of what people say to Alexa to make sure that Alexa's software responds appropriately to voice commands. I mean, it does say a small sample, but this might really trigger a creepy response in you. You might be fine with it. I don't mind. Listen to all of it. You know, if that's your prerogative, okay. But I am given pause simply because they don't use plain language in saying sometimes someone will be listening to something. What that says does not indicate to me what is actually happening. So it feels a little buried. This was also in the number 10 of the FAQ. It wasn't any, like, you scrolled a lot. And this wasn't really upfront. You can see it's in the middle of the paragraph. So it gives me pause. You may feel differently, and that's okay. It's about what you're comfortable with. So essentially, Amazon may be listening to some of the things you say. Ooh, sorry. Here we go. All right. So I mentioned Amazon, but Google is also tricky. Google is an advertising and surveillance company that's masquerading as a search engine. There have been several key lawsuits where Google has been fined for privacy violations. For example, there's a pending $5 billion lawsuit that alleges that Google still tracks users even when they use the incognito mode. So as of March, this lawsuit will go forward. And this isn't the first, nor do I think it will be the last Google lawsuit. There have been a lot. So if you can, step away from Google. That being said, it's probably best to avoid using Chrome. There are lots of other browser options. Now you have to make your own decisions. I do still use Chrome, but there are extensions you can use that increase the privacy of the browser you're using. So I use those. The one I mentioned here is Privacy Badger, but there's a lot of them out there. There's also a lot of email options. And again, I do still use Gmail, but I went in and made sure that the data grabs are turned off. Now with Google, who knows if that's actually working? But you can research how to turn off the ad personalizations and things like that in your personal preferences. So go to your account, read through stuff, really investigate what's going on, and understand what your options are. So I use DuckDuckGo instead of Google as my primary search engine. In your browser, you can set a primary search engine. So when you type things into the address bar, it will automatically do a search using whatever is set as your default. Mine is DuckDuckGo, and it really works just like Google, but it is more trustworthy with my data. So I still call things, let's Google that. But that's just because DuckDuckGo is kind of hard to say. Let's DuckDuckGo that. All right. So Facebook and Instagram are businesses. As I mentioned before, if a product is free, that's because you're the product. So if you can't step away from Facebook, then limit your use or use the Facebook Container app on Firefox. Or Container plugin. Sorry, it's a plugin for the browser, like an extension. And the reason is that Facebook is the company that uses your data to make money. There was a huge penalty that the FTC imposed on Facebook for privacy violations. And Facebook and Instagram are big business. In 2021, just a couple years ago, another FTC lawsuit was filed maintaining that Facebook has a monopoly. And through a year-long course of so the monopoly was determined by years-long course of anti-competitive conduct in their business practices. So there's also other concerns with Facebook as a company. All right. Another really easy thing you can do is have I been pwned.com. So the word pwned has its origins in video game culture and is a derivation of the word owned. So the proximity to the P and the O on the keyboard gives the pwned word. So pwned is when someone has been controlled or compromised. For example, I was pwned in the Adobe data breach. So that's what that means. So when you go to haveibeenpwned.com, you can see different data breaches that potentially your information has been involved in. And last year when I was prepping for this class for the first time, I was surprised by what I saw. So here I have some redacted screenshots. So you put your email address in there and it searches to see if that email address is associated with any data breaches, and mine had been. So then I went through my passwords and accounts and deleted old accounts and changed my passwords as I was able. So I had been pwned on 19 breached sites. So different sites that I had created accounts with or anything like that. And those sites had been associated with breaches of information. So potentially my username and login and any sort of browse history or credit card information or whatever else was on that account was just floating around out there, which was concerning to say the least. So even though I just gave you a whole speech about Google, I still am a Chrome user. And one feature that's kind of nice about Chrome is that it will tell you if your passwords have been involved in a breach. So after looking to see if I'd been pwned, I checked my passwords that were saved in my browser, and sure enough, I had more that had been involved with a breach, like kind of a lot. 38 in there. So then I started to use a password manager, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But a lot of these were from old accounts that I wasn't using anymore. So I had to go in and figure all that out. There are tons of anti-tracking apps that you can use online. I won't go through these, but here they are, and you can explore them on your own. One easy thing you can do is read up on online security. So read news articles. If there are words you don't know what they mean, Google them. And by that, I obviously mean use DuckDuckGo, but research what they mean. Lifehacker is a good source for technology articles, and they have a thread on security. But there's a lot of resources on there or available out there, and really just news sources can be a good source. Like I cited articles from the New Yorker and Forbes and CNN. So a lot of those are just freely available on news websites. So now my last 10 slides or so, I'll talk specifically about passwords. So the simple way to get your password is to guess it. But there is another way that's called a brute force attack, which is when a computer program cracks your password by running through every possible combination of letter, number, and symbol. The longer and more complex the password is, the longer it will take to crack if you encounter a brute force attack. So that would require you have a hacker who's like on your network, and he runs a program in the background to try and log into your bank account or something. So this chart was in a Newsweek article that I saw, and I thought it was really helpful. So the short passwords, even if they use symbols and numbers, can be cracked almost instantly. But if a password is long and complex, it could take 7 quadrillion years to crack. Now that's a very long, complex password, 18 characters with numbers, uppercase, lowercase, letters, numbers, symbols, all of that. And hackers probably won't take years to try and crack your password because there's other people out there who aren't using these complex passwords. So, you know, if it takes a few hours to crack your password under brute force, they'll probably have become bored and moved on. So that orange yellow area on here is probably good enough for most instances. Red, you might be a little not great. That orange, probably okay. Yellow, very good. Green, free forever. So it's up to you where you feel comfortable on that list. So long passwords are good. Long passwords that include random words and phrases are better. If your letter combinations are not in the dictionary, your phrases are not published in literature, and none of it is grammatically correct, they are harder to crack. So you can randomly mix up symbols and numbers with letters. You could substitute a 0 for an O or the @ sign for an A, for example. If your password is a phrase, consider capitalizing the first letter of each word, which will make it easier to remember and make it a more complex password. Avoid reusing passwords because if one of your accounts is vulnerable, all the accounts with that same username and password become vulnerable. But then you have to have lots of complex, hard to remember passwords. So we'll get to that in just a moment. Really avoid using obvious answers because it really makes your password easier to guess. We've all seen the spy movie where the operative guesses the password because it's the guy's dog's name 123. When setting up an account, choose security questions that are hard to guess, and choose passwords that are hard to guess. But again, now we're selecting hard to guess passwords, which means it will be hard for you to guess them too, and they're long and complex. All right. So another great practice is don't share your passwords on social media. And I say that and it seems super obvious, but as I'm scrolling through my Facebook feed, because I still use Facebook, it really does not take me long to find something like this. This is a screenshot from my Facebook account from one of my friends sharing their favorite things. How many brothers and sisters do you have? How many tattoos do you have? When were you on a cruise or whatever? These are all potential passwords. So when you're sharing these things online, you're sharing potential passwords with potential hackers. Also, don't use predictable passwords. So sometimes your job will require that you change your password. Don't just add an exclamation point or a number next to it, because that's easy to hack. If somebody has your account information from, account history or something like that, depending on what they're able to get, they can use the old password and just change the 1 to the 2 and see if it worked. These are some simple things that they can do to try and get access to your account. So you can, to save all of these complex, difficult to guess, strangely spelled, not in, movies or plays or something, these hard things, you can save those browsers in your passwords in your browser. So there is something you should know about though, and this is called the evil maid scenario. So everything that's saved on your browser, if someone physically has access to your device, they could access all of your accounts. So this scenario is called the evil maid because you're in the hotel, you leave your computer in the room, the maid comes in to clean the room, and they have access to everything. So aside from that, the answer to are your passwords in your browser safe? Um, question mark is kind of the answer. So browsers are complicated software, and there's really a lot of competing concerns. It's not clear if they're safe to save your passwords in, but they probably are. The research that I did, even security experts are like, I don't know. So what is across the board recommended is a password manager. A password manager is a program that auto generates and stores strong passwords for your accounts. The passwords are encrypted and accessible with a master password. And there are free and paid for services available. So after I prepped my last presentation, I saw how many accounts I had, how many were vulnerable, and I started using LastPass, which I like a lot. I'm using the free version. So again, do what you're comfortable with. But you download the extension and then it saves everything in that extension. It suggests really long, really complicated nonsense passwords. But then with the extension, you just click on it and it fills in that password. So I actually don't know any of my passwords. They are saved in my LastPass account. And then with the accounts, there's different options for how many devices you can have LastPass logged in on. So it makes it easier to use if you're jumping between devices. So it's easy to use and it does keep me safe. So again, there are lots of password managers out there. Read about them and then decide which one you'd like to use. So in addition to the links I used throughout this presentation, these are links to 2 presentations I watched while preparing. I highly recommend them. They're fairly recent, within the last couple years, and I found them very interesting. And if you watch them, you'll probably see some of the direct examples I am using. All right, so that is the end of my presentation. Do we have any questions that are okay in the recording? Okay, I'll go ahead and stop the recording.